Indeed he does, but not until I've said a few words at the top of the show. 3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning to you. Weird day today. We've got the Mayor of London here for a while, and then we'll do some proper radio. No offence, Sadiq Khan.
I'm leaving now.
And then it's Mystery Hour.
You sound like Liz Truss. You're so anti-London. What's the matter?
Anti-growth, anti-Khan.
I'm a South Londoner.
Coalition.
I'm a South Londoner.
What does she mean when she talks about North London? Why has that become a political pejorative? You've been around a bit longer than I have.
I think it's a caricature
that
they're trying to paint across the country, particularly in the Red Wall seats, about the elite, the metropolitan elite, North Londoners, podcasters even.
Podcasters, yes, you've become a podcaster recently.
Who go to BBC studios to criticise the government. I mean, well, you and I both know it's nonsense. But what it does, though, it plays into a feeling people have, which is felt in London as well, that those in the positions of power and influence are disconnected to the masses. And she's playing to this stereotype. And by the way, this is...
But in Doncaster, no one's going to specify between North London and South London. I think Jess Phillips made this point on Twitter.
Well, yes and no. Where's Keir Starmer from? North London.
Oh, I see.
And so you can...
Well, he's not, but he lives there.
Quite. It's very subtle what they're trying to do. And it's pitting one community, one part of the country against each other. And it's very dangerous.
Indeed. You may have gathered the Mayor of London is in the house. 0345 6060973 is the number you need to put any question you want to him. I don't know. I see the first caller is in Peterborough, so that's encouraging. But I am getting a few quibbles about being too London-centric now that our audience is marching up and down the United Kingdom. How are we going to address this, you and me? How are we going to... I mean, can we? Should we? Or do we just have to focus on your brief?
Well, I'm very happy, as you know. I never refuse or duck a call because they're not voter. We are the capital city. I'd make this point in a gentle way. I think it's patriotic to support your capital city. We are the centre for jobs, growth and prosperity, but we support other parts of the country. We haven't got the engineers to build the trains that run on the Elizabeth line. We've not got the expertise to make the electric taxis running across our city, or the specialism to build the hydrogen electric buses. So we need the rest of the country to do well, as indeed they want us to do well as well. And
of course, you remain, for the time being, the most powerful Labour politician in the country, aren't you?
Well, listen, let's look forward to a general election and hope that the government gives the British public the choice of a fresh start, and I'm looking forward to Keir Starmer being the next Prime Minister.
What do you do when the party's got a 25% average poll lead right across the board, 33% being the biggest that we've seen? How does Keir Starmer deal with that? How does he manage expectations or keep the exuberance or the triumphalism down?
I spoke to Keir very recently on this issue. He's the least complacent person you will find, number one. Number two, the only poll that really counts is the general election. What's important is we continue to hold the government to account, but also set out our vision of an alternative world where there's a Labour government having good growth, supporting families, addressing the issues that families face, rather than looking after the few.
Once again, 0345 60973 is the number to call. Olsen thinks he's being clever. He says, remind your listeners what the L in LBC stands for. Well, I will. It stands for leading, actually. Leading Britain's conversation.
I think that person showing his age, by the way, because I remember what it used to stand for as well.
I've still got it on a milk bottle. I've got a Snap, Crackle and Pop milk bottle at home. I keep my daffodils in it. Shall we hit the phones?
The first caller is from Peterborough, and it's Rebecca. Good morning, Rebecca.
Morning, hi. I really just want to know what's happening with the Metropolitan Police. We hear that they're on special measures, but what does that really mean? Because I think that feeling of kind of fear around what's happening with them and their kind of behaviours and actions spreads through the country. And we just want to know what's happening.
Rebecca, thanks for your call. There are 7 police forces around the country in special measures, the Met Police being one of them. It's the first time ever there's been so many police forces in special measures, and I think it shows that austerity, which was a choice, has consequences in relation to not just fewer police officers addressing the issues we care about, but standards falling way short. The culture being one that's not conducive to good policing. Just to reassure you, because I know you care about policing across the country, not just London and Peterborough, is the good news in London is we now have a commissioner that's a reforming commissioner, understands the challenges, but also understands the link. The more trust and confidence in policing, the less crime. And you may not know this, Rebecca, but in the last 24 hours, a story is broken about another example of a culture of overt racism, sexism, misogyny and the like. And what Londoners will see is a difference in response from this commissioner, who's not in denial, who's not being defensive, versus the previous one. And that's one of the reasons why I lost confidence in her.
Are you talking about the ex-Met police officer now working at the Home Office and this WhatsApp group that has, and some Met police whistleblowers? Let me provide some details. Newsnight broke this story last night. Dozens of messages, all shared within a group chat. Many images are racist and too offensive for the television programme to show last night. Some contain the very strongest racial slurs. There are jokes or posts referencing the government's Rwanda policy, the stuff, of course, of Suella Braverman's dreams. Others joke about recent flooding in Pakistan, which left almost 1,700 people dead. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex also feature in several memes alongside racist language. And several members of this group used to work for the Diplomatic Protection Group, which of course guards the Houses of Parliament and protects ministers. The line I draw your attention to, if I may, and thank you for asking this question, Rebecca. I'm keen to know next what happens, how you get out of special measures. But before we get on to that, here's a serving officer who spoke to the BBC on condition of anonymity. I do not think these behaviours and ideologies can be removed from the Met. Do you?
I do, but listen, you and I were here 2 months ago. I was being called out by the Met Police Federation chair. I was being called out by the former Prime Minister, the former Home Secretary, the former Police Minister, Tom Windsor, who used to run the Chief Inspectorate, and of course the former Commissioner. Whereas on the other side you had women and girls, black Londoners, LGBTQ plus Londoners, ethnic minority Londoners, and me appalled by this culture. I think you can address this culture with the right leadership at the top. First, you've got to recognise there's a problem and then take steps to address that. And Rebecca, your question about special measures I'm meeting with HMI next week with the Commissioner to set out our plans, the Met Police's plans and our plans, how we come out of special measures. Sir Mark Rowley has said he'd like us to be out of special measures in the next 12 to 18 months. I support him in that. And that means root and branch change. Just so you know, Rebecca, there's going to be further probable bad news in the next few weeks with Dame Louise Casey publishing her interim report about what she's found. I asked her, to look into the standards and culture, persuaded the former commissioner, to do so. And I'm afraid her report may well be sober reading for those who are still in denial about the scale of the problem. And I'm somebody who's pro-police, Rebecca.
Who is in denial then? Because the new commissioner has said, I have taken over as the leader of an organisation that has been far too weak in taking on those who undermine the honest and dedicated majority. It's a fairly blatant swing at Cressida Dick, that, isn't it? And
those around her, and the chairman of the Police Federation, and Tom Windsor, and Boris Johnson, and Priti Patel, and Kit Malthouse, and many, many others. And this is some of the things we've been up against.
Well, they criticised you for the method in which you got...
No, that's not what the Police Federation chair said, if you remember.
Go on.
They were supported unequivocally how popular,
no, you're quite right,
and how well-liked... when you're a leader, it's not just about being the most popular person in the room. It's about making tough decisions. And I think Sir Mark has shown in the last 3 weeks, he can make those tough decisions at the same time as getting core policing right. He's the commissioner, by the way, who said the police should be responding to all burglaries. And also, I want to thank all those police officers with Sir Mark's help who made sure the Queen's funeral passed so successfully.
Yeah, I mean, it's
safely.
a tough job, isn't it? Because you're only going to get noticed if you mess something up. It's not unlike being a politician. What did he say in interview, or what has he done so far? Just give me the before and after. So let's imagine a scenario in which some police officers are found to have been involved in a disgusting WhatsApp group. What happened under the last regime and what's going to happen under the new regime?
So the culture that Sir Mark is trying to engender, which I fully support, is not to be a passive bystander, but to be an active bystander. So you have the confidence to challenge bad behaviour, bad language and so forth, but also to report it as well, having confidence that something will happen. And one of the things that's most upsetting about the Newsnight story you referred to is the lack of confidence an appalled police officer had in the system.
27 years service,
this.
And he didn't. He went to the BBC because he didn't have faith in the Met or professional standards.
And that's what Sir Mark's trying to change. This culture where people will feel that if they report things that are wrong, action will be taken, because who you're letting down, not just the public, but you're letting down the decent, dedicated, brave officers who want to do right, who aren't racist, sexist, misogynistic and so forth.
So that's the key thing to do, is to give people the confidence to come forward, that they won't become pariahs in their own canteen, or they won't...
The phrase that used to exist when I was a practicing lawyer was canteen culture. the idea where certain banter took place in the canteen, it was acceptable. You go to a pub after work and a police officer will be using this sort of inappropriate language and behaviour, and that affected the way they policed. We see some of that now in WhatsApp groups. But we've got to give police officers the confidence to challenge that. But to make it clear, if you're thinking about joining the police service, if you're thinking about staying in the police service, there's a zero tolerance towards this sort of stuff.
And how do they get out of special measures? What are you looking at? Who makes the decision?
Yeah,
and what will it be based on?
So the good news here, and this should be reassuring to the British public, is it's not the police marking their own homework. So the police inspectorate, the HMI, Her Majesty's Inspectorate, have set out a number of concerns they've got. They will meet regularly. They're not simply throwing the police to the wolves. They'll meet regularly with the senior team in the Met Police Service, myself and others, over the course of the next period to see what changes we've made. And it's for Her Majesty's Inspectorate to be reassured and persuaded before we come out with special measures. And I think that's reassuring to not just Londoners, but the other 6 police forces around the country who are also in special measures.
I will be ruthless in rooting out those corrupting officers and staff, including racists and misogynists, from our organisation. He's come out all guns firing, hasn't he?
Well, listen, because he's passionate. He's somebody who left the police service for 4 years, has chosen to come back to the toughest job in policing because he's so passionate about getting policing right. But also him and his deputy, Len Owens, they're heartbroken that a profession they joined, a vocation they had, public servants, has been, generalised as being all bad.
Yeah.
It's not all bad. But there is a culture, there are systems in place that need to be changed. And I think Sir Mark's the reforming commissioner who's going to take big steps to address that.
Watch this space. Before we go to the next call, Rebecca, thank you. I've got a slightly odd request. Why can't zip cards for school children be on their phones?
I'm not sure what you mean in relation to using buses and stuff.
Yeah. Like you can use your phone to get through the tube and to pay for your bus fare. Kids have plastic cards that they lose all the time. I've been asked by a 14-year-old to ask you why you can't introduce technology that lets them do it on their phones.
Often when I'm on Speak to Sadiq, there's these cracking ideas which I've not got an answer to.
Usually mine.
No, I mean, it's not the 14-year-olds, to be fair, James. I mean, the good ones tend to come from your listeners. But can I take that away? Because it's it doesn't. I don't see why you can't.
It's a brilliant idea, right?
Yeah. But also it deals with fraud and stuff. Because the big issue that used to exist was somebody's Oyster card gets stolen. That's why you had the photo with the Oyster card, because it's really important to do so. And also you don't want people losing 7 Oyster cards in a week. So a phone is personal to the child, so I don't see...
Technology exists because you can do it with lots of... Anyway, I'll leave that with you.
Yeah, well, talking of technology, we're launching today for the first time e-bikes, the Santander cycle hire scheme, so we'll have 500 across London. A good example of technology assisting those who may be less fit or have to cycle up hills.
Yes.
So it's the same price as a bus fare, 30 minutes, and 500 across London, 800 docking stations. Download the app. You'll see which docking stations have the e-bikes.
Back to the phones.
The next caller, thanks, Rebecca. The next caller is from Twickenham, and it's Rajdev. Good morning, Rajdev.
Oh, I just have to point... Hang on, Rajdev. It's His Majesty's Inspectorate now. We both said her.
Yeah. Apologies to King Charles III.
He will be listening. He never misses Speak to Sadiq.
Apologies, Your Majesty. Rajdev.
In light of 2021 being recorded as the year featuring the most teenage homicides in London, largely due to knife crime, I'm really asking the Mayor a question he's probably been asked every year. What does he expect to do to try and reduce this phenomenon? And that's in light also of, in the last couple of weeks, a police officer being stabbed in Leicester Square. What is he going to do about the culture of knife carrying and knife crime in London?
I think you've been asked this every month
Rajdev,
that you've come into the studio, and things have they got better? Thank you, Rajdev.
Yeah, Rajdev, this is a very important question, Rajdev. I mean, this is the issue that keeps me up at night time. It has for the last 6 years since I've been Mayor. One of the things that we did some years ago was to use business rates, revenues and increase council tax to invest in young people, what we call dealing with the causes of crime, the public health approach that you may have seen used in Glasgow. And there is good news, Rajdev, no complacency at all. I met yesterday a bereaved auntie whose niece had been murdered recently, and I regularly meet bereaved families. both as an MP and as the mayor. So because of the public health approach, it basically means, Raj, they're giving young people constructive things to do after school, weekends, in holidays, having role models and mentors, investing in youth clubs that have been decimated over the last 12 years, rather than just having all the eggs in the tough and crime basket, important though it is. Over the course of the last 9 months, the sobering good news is we've reduced by 68% the number of teenage homicides. To give you an idea, this time last year, if you and I were speaking, Rajdev, we'd be talking about, I'm afraid, 2023 teenage homicides. This year, although it's 11 too many, that's a big reduction. And also what we're doing is making sure the police have the support they need, 1,300 more police officers. And if I was speaking to you in 2016 compared to now, we have seen a reduction in knife crime, a reduction in knife crime injuries for those below the age of 25, a reduction in burglary and gun crime, but it's still too high. And that's why I made this point in answer to a previous caller, Rebecca, in relation to policing and them being in special measures. Austerity has consequences, right? If you've got few police officers, you've got less youth clubs, fewer youth workers, less things for young people to do, deprivation going up without excusing criminality. That's one of the reasons why it's gone up across the country. And in London, we're bucking the national trend.
What did they do in Glasgow specifically?
So what the public health approach means basically is think about crime as a health illness. So when there's an infection, you deal with the infection, you stop it spreading, but you stop it occurring in the first place. And they relied upon data. In Glasgow, there was a different issue. It was drugs and alcohol. But the key issue was to stop crime occurring in the first place, prevention using data. All that means is we look at young people and what's called adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. If a child has seen abuse at home, if they're in danger of being excluded from school, if somebody in their family is being the victim of crime and so forth, intervene early doors rather than later on. Simple examples we've invested in, youth workers in A&Es. Often 70% of those arrested for murder have themselves been the victim of crime. Is there a teachable moment or a reachable moment where you can have a youth worker in an A&E or a police station or elsewhere to try and turn that young person's life around? And in Glasgow, it took them 10 years. We've managed to make big progress in just 6 years. But it's that long-term investment. And to give credit to the SNP, it's really important. Labour started it. And what Nicola Sturgeon or Alex Salmond could have done was ditch it, but they carried on with this. And that sustained continuum has led to the big reduction in Glasgow.
Worth mentioning, I don't think any Scottish police forces are in special measures either, are they?
Different regime.
Yeah.
Police Scotland has. Police Scotland is one police force now. It's rather than numbers. We've got 43 in England and Wales.
Another call. Thank you, Rajdev.
Thank you very much, Rajdev. The next caller is from Wellingborough, and it's Kevin. Morning, Kevin.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm not bad, Well, it depends what question you ask, Kevin. But until this call, I'm okay, Good to speak to you.
No, it's not a bad question. It kind of follows on from the last one, to be honest. How do you personally feel that the Conservative Party constantly attack you on the figures of knife crime and crime within London, even though the figures are higher in the West Midlands, where there's a Conservative mayor, but they gave him nothing but praise this week?
I mean, thanks for your question, Kevin. Just checking.
Is he statistically correct?
Yeah, correct. He is.
Right.
Yeah, we've bucked Kevin's spot on. So in London, we've bucked the national trend because of the public health approach and because of our investment. So Kevin, I don't mind at all being criticised on policy and based upon the facts. What annoys me is misinformation, often from the Tories, which is then written up by sympathetic journalists, misinforms the public, and then they're not just based on lies, but then there's lots of hatred towards me. I'll give you an example linked with the story you talk about in relation to the misinformation about crime. So a couple of weeks ago, just over a week ago, a Conservative sympathetic newspaper wrote a story that's completely untrue, saying I've said no to a statue of Her Majesty the Queen in Trafalgar Square.
Which paper was it? You can say so, can't
it
you?
was, I think, the Telegraph,
Right.
maybe in the Times.
Okay.
Completely untrue. That Sadiq Khan is blocking a statue of Queen Elizabeth II on the 4th plinth. As a direct consequence of that untrue story, the amount of racist and abusive hatred directed at me shot through the roof. It's already bad enough. Now, that story is not true. Yet it's generated a number of people, having racist, abusive social media towards me, which has an impact on somebody then deciding to incite hatred against me and/or wishing to cause me harm. And there are other examples, Kevin, where this happens. And I think sometimes they know what they're doing. So Liz Truss must know, she's an intelligent woman, that actually in London we've bucked the national trend. Knife crime is down, knife crime with injury is down, burglary is down, gun crime is down, no complacency at all compared and contrast to other parts of the country. You've seen the horrible murders. You mentioned West Midlands, you mentioned Liverpool. We saw what happened yesterday, that's reported in the paper elsewhere in the country. They don't talk about that, do they? And these cheap shots, if I was being unfair, I'd say it's unpatriotic, right? Because you're anti-London, you're talking down London at a time where the government relies upon growth. And so the key thing, Kevin, is for me to explain what's really happening, for Londoners to know what's happening. They see for themselves the additional police officers. They see for themselves the new youth clubs opened up because of our investment, the brilliant work done by youth workers, councils, charities and others. And that's why it's really important. One of the reasons I come on to speak to Sadiq here is to tell the other side of the story, because you've got to be in the pitch to tell the other side of the story.
Are we going? This is a slightly odd follow-on question, but you've raised it. Are we going to have a statue of the late Queen? Anyway?
So it's something we consult the royal household about and the government. By the way,
it would be odd to put her on the fourth plinth anyway, because
can I say this?
she'd be junior.
Had I said, you know what, let's have a statue of Queen Elizabeth II on the fourth plinth. I tell you what, these haters would say, why has she been demoted to the back? Why is Nelson bigger than Queen Elizabeth II?
Yeah, she's a much more important monarch than George IV.
Right.
Why is he on the other plinth?
I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't.
Yeah.
And so that's a good example of sort of sliding doors parallel universe where to some people, I can't do anything good.
And as you remind us, the repercussions are pretty serious. It still washes. Are you part of the anti-growth coalition?
Well, but can I just say, on a serious note, Rachel Reeves became Shadow Chancellor, I think, just over 2 years ago. She can't speak a sentence without mentioning the word growth. I mean, Keir Starmer, earlier in this summer, said that his three priorities are growth, growth, growth. And so what Liz Truss has done is quite smart politics, stolen our language of growth. But, it's like a game to them. These are people, livelihoods being affected by these games. Mortgages going up, rent going up, food going up, energy prices going up. I'm for growth. I've been talking about good growth for a number of years. Good growth means people getting the London living wage. Good growth means investing in skills, investing in future-proof jobs, green, digital, creative industries, construction, health, social care. So I'm the opposite of anti-growth. I'm pro-growth. It's got to be the right sort of growth. And actually, you don't get growth by being anti-London. And that's why I'm hoping Liz Truss and her team understand the importance of not doing down our capital city.
What are we going to do about Brexit? Because there's something fundamentally ridiculous about a government claiming to be all about growth when they have deliberately dragged the country out of the single market. And the OBR suggests that's a 4% hit to GDP, minimum, more than COVID, more than coronavirus. So how I mean, many people are keen for those of us who knew what was going to happen to stop talking about it. But
if you park for a second, the EU, let's accept we left the EU because it's clearly a fact we have. Actually, if your obsession is growth, the easiest way, the quickest way to get growth is to join the single market. Right? You're still outside the EU, but by joining the single market, you increase growth almost overnight. And by the way, what does it do to the confidence of the markets? It boosts it. So let's not pretend that the government's, concerned about growth because they're really concerned about growth. It's an ideological game they're playing, saying, you're either with us, and by the way, only our policies will lead to growth, and if you don't agree with our policies, you're anti-growth. It's a caricature, and it's this, what we call in politics a dividing line that you try and portray. And so anybody who's not for my policies is anti-growth, anti my policies. And by the way, who's in this hodgepodge of people? XR, North Londoners, Labour, Lib Dems, SNP, Greens, anybody basically who's not part of the 19%.
Who's not in it?
Well, basically anybody who's not part of the 19% who currently support the Tory party, right? Isn't it?
Right.
And you mentioned in the intro to this programme, it seems like, everybody's, you're either with us or you're against us in relation to being growth or anti-growth. And the problem is they then say you're talking down the country. They then say you're talking down our businesses when what you're doing is calling out some of the consequences of Brexit. And my point about Brexit is this. Actually, look to see who's trying to make Brexit a success. It's us Remainers, by the way, who try to make Brexit a success.
It was always going to be.
Not Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson or, those, others, Michael Gove, who vacated the pitch now. It's those who said this would happen, who are now trying our very best to make it work and to criticise the government of Ireland who have been proved right in relation to the sensitivity of the Good Friday Agreement, the importance of not having borders between North and South, the fragility of peace, just beggars belief.
27 minutes after 10 is the time. Should we take another call?
The next caller.
Before we do that, I do remember Gary Burton reminds us that you would go for weeks on end, particularly during the coronavirus, without having any contact with Downing Street. Do you expect that to change with the new incumbent?
I do. I tell you why. Because you've got to take people at face value. You know, Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, Simon Clarke and the others are saying they want growth. You will not get growth of 2.5% or anywhere near it in the next 2 years without working with the capital city. That includes working with me. I speak to businesses, I speak to families every day. They want to support the growth initiative, and that means working with us. And I'm hoping things change. And just to reassure listeners, you know, I've already spoken to Simon Clarke, who's the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, and I'm hoping that leads to a better relationship with this.
Even though you're
last knot.
Clearly a fully paid up member of the Anti-Growth Coalition.
I mean, the knockabout stuff happens at party conference. I'm hoping it's just knockabout stuff because Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, you know, need to work with us. We need to work with them. Put aside the silly stuff and let's make sure we support families rather than, you know, throw them under a bus.
I just been asked to clarify something. When you were criticising, can you clarify that you were referring to Ken Marsh, the chair of the Metropolitan Police Federation, rather than Steve Hartshorn,
Absolutely.
the chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales?
Absolutely. Apologies to Steve. Yeah, I definitely wasn't talking about Ken Marsh.
Back to the phones.
The next caller is from South London. It's Bromley and it's Paul. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, James. Hope you're both well.
Thank you, mate.
My question is to do with rent caps and such alike. I'm a broker, and obviously with what's happened in the past few weeks, rates are getting completely out of hand. With that in mind, and obviously interest rates going up, and if you've got a professional landlord, which is their business rather than an accidental landlord, with the rates going up, and if a rent cap was put in place, how would you mitigate the algorithm between what they've got to now lay out with sort of rates being 7, 8, 9% compared to what they were with the rent cap? Now, and I get the rent cap. I grew up on the Stonebridge Park estate when it was a horrendous place with putting 50p in the meter for gas, and my mum and dad struggling. So I get that side of it, but with the rates being what they are and going up exponentially, with the income potentially coming in and then that being capped, how would you get around that? Because my brain works like an algorithm, and sometimes you can look at the figures and they just don't stack.
Well,
so how would you look at it?
Sure. Paul, thanks for your question. Firstly, where have you been for the last 6 years when interest rates weren't 6%? Right? So it's funny how suddenly those who have always been against rent controls and against rent freezes are now saying, aha, look, interest rates are now 6%. By the way, because of the government's mini budget. And as a consequence, you can't have rent controls. Well, I make a number of points in a polite, courteous way. Firstly, over the last 6 years, many landlords have made big profits, right? Because interest rates are 0%, 0.25%, 0.5%. And so the revenues coming in from the rents has far exceeded the amount they're paying in relation to mortgages. That's assuming we're talking about those who have one or two properties and are, inverted commas, amateur landlords. You and I both know, because you're a broker, there are many professional landlords who own hundreds of properties who are making massive, massive profits, aside from the build-to-rent market. So that's the first point. The second point is what I'm asking the government to do in the short term to help families during the cost of living crisis is to freeze rents for 2 years. That will save the average family £3,000. 2.4 million Londoners are currently renting, and that avoids families having to either travel 2 hours to get to school each day to take their kids to school because they've moved out of London, but also families having to be rehoused every 6 months. But in the medium term, what the government's got to do is devolve powers to me so I can set up what's called a private renters commission to work with people like you, landlords, renters and others to come up with a system that doesn't affect the supply chain. And so what I'm not saying, Paul, is give me the powers to do rent controls from today. I'm saying give me the powers today to freeze rents. Then give me the powers to set up a commission to work with brokers and landlords and others to make sure the supply chain keeps going. But we continue to have a situation where, because in the short and medium term, we're simply not going to meet the demand of housing, we try and keep the rental market at a level where people can afford to live in London. And by the way, Paul, if I was speaking to you 6 years ago when I first became mayor, I'd be saying I'm worried about porters and cleaners who can't afford to live in London. Now it's nurses, teachers, police officers, and that's one of the reasons they live outside London and travel in, because they can't afford to live in London, and it's bad for our city.
Do you want to come back, Paul?
Yeah, money, and I get it completely, and I'm all for my history as a child makes me want to protect that. My niece works as a nurse in London, and she lives in Garston in Watford.
Gosh.
Because she can't afford. She has to travel an hour to an hour and a half each way every day on top of a 12-hour shift. Go figure. You can't work properly like that. You can't. And as much as she says, she's tired, and it's just not. It's not good. It's not healthy for the environment. It's not healthy for the economy for the economy of health. It's just not right. You should be able to live and work in a near place. So I'm all for that. I mean, and if you set a commission up, I'll quite happily come down and
because we need your expertise. And I've never said, by the way, and I announced my policy of a commission 3 years ago. I've never said, that I would do it without listening to brokers and landlords and others like you. One of the things we're doing, Paul, to help people like nurses like your nieces, we are saying when we are working with developers and councils to have genuinely affordable homes, key workers should get first dibs, because we need the key workers like nurses who did so much during the pandemic, who are travelling, as you said, an hour and a half each way to work. They're knackered when they get to work, let alone getting home, and they're spending a fortune in relation to travel as well. So the new homes that we're building, and last year we began more than any time since the 70s, we're saying not just those in the waiting list who live locally, but also key workers should have the opportunity to get that genuinely affordable housing.
Should we do one more?
I'd love to, yeah. The next caller is from Pinner, and it's Richard. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning all. Mine's a very simple question. When are TfL going to publish the results of the ULED expansion consultation?
Richard, I think it'll be later on this year. I should be getting a report next month, I think, in relation to the responses to the consultation. Just to remind those who aren't aware of this from outside London, so what I'm consulting on are plans to expand the ultra-low emission zone, because we have in London more than 4,000 premature deaths because of air pollution, many hundreds of thousands of Londoners with all sorts of health issues, and it's the poorest Londoners least likely to own a car who suffer the worst consequences. So I'm consulting on expanding it to all of London.
And when will it be out?
Next month. I think we're in October now, so either late October or early November. And just to remind listeners, this is not a referendum. It's a consultation, but I'll be taking on board the sort of substantive points people have been making in relation to how we can address some of the issues, concerns people may have, because it's really important that everyone in London gets the benefit of clean air, not just those in central London and inner London who currently benefit from the ULEZ.
Are you satisfied with that response, Richard?
Well, not really, because it talks about the poorest Londoners, but the poorest Londoners will be the ones who suffer, the ones who have to travel into London and paying £12.
Oh, hang on a minute. The question was when will the consultation be coming out? And we can talk about what's in it when we've seen it, can't we?
It's interesting that the consultation ended in July.
Yeah.
Why will it take until November to publish the results?
Because it's not a numbers game, Richard. It's not counting up how many people were for, how many people were against. It's not a referendum. That's what weak leaders do. It's a consultation where I've taken on board we'll be taking on board the substantive points people are making, seeing if they can be ameliorated, seeing if they can be addressed, and then responding in a substantive way to the points raised by those who have taken the time to respond to the consultation.
And with your help, Richard, we'll be all over it when the consultation is actually published. I can promise you that. I think we're done. 10:36 is the time. It's been a while since the last one. Was there a reason for that? Was there a hiatus, or did I imagine it?
No, it's just
Her Majesty's passing probably interfered with the schedule.
Actually, I beg your pardon. Yeah. We obviously things did have to change because of that, but we now have His Majesty, as you reminded me.
Yeah.
And so looking forward to seeing you more often.
See you next month, and you may have news about the zip cards.
Listen, by the way, if we decide to do it, I'm claiming
Can you name it after me?
I'm not giving you the credit.
Why can't you name it after me? The JOB cards for young Londoners.
Nice try.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Dominic Ellis is here now with your headlines.
More than 30 people have been killed in a shooting at a childcare centre in Thailand. Police say a gunman reported to be a former police officer opened fire and then took his own life. Most of the victims are believed to be young children. The Royal College of Nursing says critical care would still be provided if a strike over pay goes ahead. Around 300,000 nurses are being balloted for the first UK-wide walkout in the RCN's 106-year history.